Hello, everybody. I am Marguerite, Breedy-Haynes, and we have a powerful interview coming up with Sean Harrison from Jamaica, poet. We are trying to add him now. Hello, Sean. How are you?
Hello, good morning, ma'am. I am well. I am well. Giving thanks.
Praise God. I first saw you speaking on a Facebook Live, and I said, I
Yes.
have to interview you. Didn't know who you were, but I started to listen to you, and I thought this would be a really educational thing for a lot of people.
Indeed.
Sean Harrison, tell us about Sean Harrison. You're not only a poet, but you were speaking a little bit about mental illness. Tell us
Yes.
about Sean Harrison, and we want to interview Sean for Breathe magazine. Tell us about Sean Harrison.
Well, I would just say I was, you know, an ordinary person who, as Mary says, found extraordinary love. Even though, looking back, I can see that the Lord had his hand on me in a very special way, since my tender years. As a child growing up in St. Thomas, Jamaica, my life was bittersweet. There were happy moments, there were sad moments, but God has remained true and He has remained faithful to His word, and His promises. And I am just the kind of person who loved music as a child, grew up in a home, where music was one of the main staples. Mother and father both very musical. And since an early age, I actually began to sing in the church. As a matter of fact, I was told more recently by an elderly friend of the family, that's Miss Hyacinth Shaw. She revealed to me only many years later in my adulthood that I did my first full length concert in Morant Bay, St. Thomas, at the age of 3 years old. And,
Wow.
yes, and, I was particularly gifted, but didn't really know the extent to which the Lord had his hand on me. And so, growing up, in Morant Bay, St. Thomas, I was, I would say I was beloved, by many, but there was also a side to the whole thing where knowing, looking back and knowing, just how the enemy, works, where sometimes even from your conception, he gets wind of your purpose and starts to come against you, working, to try to derail the purpose God had for you. I was not short of traumatic moments and very difficult moments as I moved through my life. But, I was as a child, very buoyant, very bubbly, wide eyed, starry eyed, and growing up in the country here in St. Thomas, where in those days you didn't have the heinous crimes and, the things that many parents face as challenges now with their children in today's world. You could just run wild and free right here in Morant Bay, St. Thomas. And, the friendships that were there, the sense that were there, the sense of community, all made made me feel, very secure at points, in spite of the fact that, you know, what was going to become, a very stormy life, was waiting in, you know, the wings, so I was able to explore. I was able to develop my talent for singing as opportunities, arose even in the Morant-based Seventh-day Adventist Church and otherwise. My mother was one. Patricia Veronica Harrison was one who particularly nurtured my musical gift, and she had me singing all over the parish of St. Thomas. I sang at hospitals, I sang at the infirmaries, I sang at the graduations, I sang at the funerals, I sang at the weddings, I sang at the customer appreciation days at the bank, Jamaica National Bank, and I would sing in school. I was always using that gift, and I did not know that the fact that I remained faithful, with that gift until I was not able to sing anymore as a result of prolonged use of antipsychotic medications in early adulthood. Little did I know that it would be, my faithfulness in using that gift to the glory of God would be precursor to the Lord gifting me in even more areas, such as writing in general, poetry, and different forms of writing, and, even though, yeah, the Lord had his hand on me, I did have my moments. I was a very rambunctious child, and, even though some people's testimony of me was that I was quiet, in the family circle, it was a different story. I mean, even though I knew that there was a love that was undergirding the whole family relationships and interactions and structure, my family not really understanding at the time, what it was to deal with someone who was highly artistic and gifted, yes, would not have nurtured me in the way, even though they tried, even though my mother tried, they would not have really nurtured me in the way that was really conducive to my maintaining and cultivating good mental health. But that wasn't the only thing. As I grew and I became afflicted with, you know, paranoid schizophrenia, I still could look back at a process that was at play that really, would have amounted to a number of factors that would work together, conspire at least, to actually bring me to a place where I became totally unraveled mentally. There was the there were the pressures in the family because siblings, were very critical of me, at times, and it was hard, and also there was a generational element, to the whole issue of mental illness, where I was told much later in adulthood that a number of our relatives on both sides, but mostly on my father's side, were actually deemed mentally ill. And
Can I
even on
can
my
I can I
mother's,
say something to you,
yes,
Sean? The
yes,
reason why I reach out to you for this magazine because I can help you.
okay,
Because I can help you. When I saw an intelligent young man.
yes,
I am coming to Jamaica and I'm coming especially to see you.
okay,
I'm
okay,
because I can help you. I just okay, I want you to explain to us. You used to be a bank teller at some point.
yes, yes.
I saw
Bank
a
clerk,
very right. I saw a very intelligent young man, very
yes.
gifted young man. How old are you?
I'm now 42 years old.
Well, you're still
42 years
young.
old.
So, but the thing about it is that the mental illness you have, that's a family curse. I listen
Okay,
to you. It is a family curse. And the Lord told me to reach out to you because I can help you. I can
okay.
help you. You are from the Adventist faith, huh?
Yes, and I have actually stepped away from, that, and I'm not necessarily, as I explained to you, I'm not necessarily with organized worship or religion at this point in time.
It doesn't
But
matter
I
as long as
I
you
grew up
still,
with
as
that.
long as you're still with God, it doesn't matter. But at
Yes,
some point, the Lord will direct you. Um,
yes.
I don't know who shared your post, but I
Yes.
saw this post and the Lord said to me, reach out to him and help him. Reach out to him and help him, because this is a family curse. It's a curse.
Okay.
So mental illness, what you're going through is, I heard you said that some family members were going through the same thing you're going through and people were critical of you.
Yes.
Tell me at what age you started to have this problem.
Well, the funny thing about it, is that when I looked back, there was actually a defining moment, where I was actually in attendance to a charismatic crusade when I lived in Kingston, Jamaica, and was working my first job at the bank, and there was a charismatic crusade that I was attending because I had deep rooted issues that I battled, for most of my life, that I did not know how to address or where to turn. So I turned to the church, where, I thought at this healing crusade I would have been able to have received my deliverance. So actually, even though a number of stressors were acting upon me because the job was very stressful, I was attending the crusade and I wasn't eating, I wasn't going home, I was going home late in the night, and I realized that a number of things were conspiring and things came to a head in the crusade as I was reaching out. I realized that I was actually manifesting some things. I was told by someone outside of the Adventist circle and people who explained, to me that it was really the fact that I was inhabited by spirits and the anointing that was there actually, stirred up the spirits and all of that. The Adventist church had a very different explanation, as it concerns the body of their doctrines. And of course, they're averse to anything that has to do with, what we know the anointing to be in the other Protestant churches and stuff like that. But I would just like to explain, that even though things came to a head and eventually I was taken over by these demons at home, you know, and, ended up in the psychiatric ward of the University Hospital of the West Indies, where I started a spiral down the dark road of mental illness and medical.
God.
Please let me explain. When I things came to a head and I ended up in the hospital, I mean that was cited as, the trigger. But looking back, I had a number of idiosyncrasies as a child. I would talk to myself a lot. I would repeat phrases from conversations, even coming up just out of the blue. And I realized I was also very self conscious. And I realized that it was really the paranoia that was brewing. And so, really, what I believe and what I have identified looking back as what was at play was really, you know, my my actual trek into process schizophrenia, because there are two types of schizophrenia as it concerns onset in the psychiatric community. One is called process and one is called reactive, right? I process schizophrenia.
Explain to us. Explain to us.
Yes, process schizophrenia is usually one affecting a person where it actually had a number of it would have actually had a number of other triggers that would have been working overtime to bring you to a place of total disorientation. That is process schizophrenia. So you can identify, faulty family structures. Some people in some schools of thought in psychiatry, a domineering mother figure, weak father figure, also a generational element, and also trauma, you know, and all of these factors were present in my case. All of these factors were present in my case, and I realized that this, looking back and the Lord giving me insights, this was actually a very long time in coming. The Lord showed me that, Sean, for all the pressures that were upon you, even since childhood, you would have eventually broken down anyway, whether or not you had gone to that charismatic crusade, because there were some people in the Adventist church, and I must tell you, the Adventist church had provided a very good foundation for me. And there were people in that church who definitely loved me and embraced me in the Morant Seventh-day Adventist church. But sadly, sometimes there are some things that do not find what should I say, place in certain circles, and you are not necessarily able to get the kind of help you need because, it is not the environment, the spiritual environment is not conducive to the level and the depth of what it is that you are going through and suffering. So process schizophrenia. Mine, I would say, was a classic case. As I said, there were relatives, there was trauma, there was a brother, of mine who was very dear to me, who died, when I was 14 years old. And he was actually gunned down, and he was actually buried on my birthday. And that
Wow.
brother's death took such a toll on my psyche that I was broken for years upon years upon years. I mourned him, even amid the smiles, even amid the bubbly, kind of thing. I mourned him because he was very, very good to me, my brother Dexter, you know, and then,
Wow.
there was also, the physical, the biochemical factors, where, you know, um, my nutrition, my development as a child, as a toddler, as a baby, was not necessarily uh, facilitated, in the best way that it should have. And I believe sometimes when there is mental illness, persons tend to think that it is one mode of treatment or intervention, at the expense or exclusive to any other thing. But usually with mental illness, as you may know, there are a number of factors that would need to be taken into consideration. The psychological, the emotional, the spiritual, the nutritional, the actual biophysical. Because if, you don't fortify yourself with good food, and the right foods, it definitely can affect, many things and many processes in your body, and interestingly enough, I learned that as a child, I wasn't breastfed. I am not blaming anybody. What happened was that I was told, these are things I discovered along the way, that my mother had inverted nipples, and as a result of that, was not able to breastfeed any of her children, and so would sometimes express the milk and have it in the fridge for us as babies, and then, we would drink it from the bottle. But my father told me that I was not taking my mother's milk, and so he had to take the formula, the formulas for me from Guantanamo Bay where he worked, and that was what I was fed on. But the truth is that I had a number of illnesses, even congenital, that would actually indicate that the physical development, was not necessarily um, facilitated in the best way. So I can tell you that from the age of from infancy up until adulthood, I have suffered with over 30 illnesses. Some were
Wow.
major, some were a bit minor, but when you think of, 30 illnesses coming all the way up to adulthood, that's quite a lot, coupled with the mental problem that I developed. So I am just touching on this to say it's a very important point that sometimes persons in church circles, especially those in the charismatic circles, tend to, point to deliverance, 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 as, this staple for dealing with certain things at the expense of creating a balance, as it concerns the treatment and the dealing with the healing process, especially as it entails mental illness.
I
Mental
want to say
illness is
some,
something. Yes.
sorry, I want to say something
Okay.
to you.
Yes.
I'm not only a powerful deliverance minister.
Yes.
How did I get into deliverance? You may not know that about me, but watch
Okay.
my videos and you will see people get deliverance right on Facebook. How did I become a deliverance minister? How did I know that I had this gift? Thousands of people seek me out daily. How? My first daughter, the first person I ever cast out a demon from was my first daughter.
Okay.
She was like, I was fasting for more than 20, I was fasting for a long time.
Yes.
And I had realized that my daughter, Carrie, there were some funny things that she used to do as a child.
Okay.
And the Lord said to me, so I always used to have my children in the Bible.
Okay.
I rest my hands on her, and then she started this thing. So she said to me, Mommy, she said, when I lay my hands on her, something came from the top of her head and left her.
Yes.
When I look at her family background, there were people in her family background that had mental illness.
Yes.
And I, as a mother, started to go into her family background, her father's family. My daughter
Yes.
today is a university graduate, and I continue to pray for her. So when I saw you, Sean, the first person I ever cast out a demon from was my child.
Okay.
So when I saw you, I saw a situation that did not need to be taken care of medically, but
Yes.
a situation that needed to be taken care by God.
Okay. May I interject though? May I
Yeah,
speak
go
now?
on.
What I would like to say is that since the onset of the illness, it started in me a quest to get answers. It started in me a quest to be free. And I must say, I was actually in dialogue and in contact with a number of deliverance ministers along the way. Deliverance ministers tried at different points to cast these demons out of me, and there were manifestations, but then it always seemed to go back to square one, where the only thing that seemed to provide any kind of measurable and sustained help was really the medications. You know, so I have been, to that place, and at this point in my journey, taking medications, my it is not my preferred mode of dealing with it, but I realize that it does work for me. And sometimes, as I was exposed to the deliverance ministers and the deliverance processes, I realized that every time I would go back to square one, the ministers would cite that there was something that I might have done, open doors that I might have, allowed for some reason or the other. And I just got a bit frustrated with the fact that I was always going back to square one and being told that it's my fault. And,
You
and I
need
knew
you need a
I
clean
was trying the best I could.
you
So
need
I would just
a
like to
clean
say,
minister, Sean, a clean one. A clean
and I
one
do
that
believe,
is
and I
a
do
clean
believe
one
that a
that
number of,
yes,
okay, I'm
sorry, a
sorry.
clean one that is sanctified, Holy Ghost filled. Now, we are doing this interview. I don't want to bring in my expertise in this right now. I don't want to do this. I want
Yes,
you, I want you to educate the
okay,
people. I
yes,
want you to educate the people. Probably later on,
yes,
we'll talk about something more. I'm coming to Jamaica, and I think I need to see you when I come to Jamaica. The fact of
okay,
the
that
matter
would be
is that
nice.
I need you. So, what happens to you when you are going through that kinds of mental illness? What happens to you? Tell
Okay.
us.
Yes. All right. Well, the diagnosis, the initial diagnosis, and for most of the time that I actually suffered, the diagnosis was paranoid schizophrenia, which is cited as one of the most serious, if not the most serious, mental illness. This actually results in a total unraveling of the mental processes and faculties of a person. So when that person, is in that acute stage, there is actually nothing that makes sense to him, even though he may not be aware of what is happening. And there are few things that he will do or say that make sense to anybody around. So I will tell you that when a person is not medicated, when a person is in the acute phase of the schizophrenic process, a total jumbling of reasoning thoughts occurs. What happens is that there are things that come into your mind that are very, very disconcerting. There are things that come into your mind that are very dark, thoughts that are very dark. And many persons who would be exposed to even the the activities of serial killers would have learned, or would have read about, they would have learned just about how complex their thinking processes were, and unfortunately for some of them that is a diagnosis. But the truth is that someone who is not thus affected, as maybe the serial killers, will probably go through a milder version of what they actually, the machinations that they actually come up with in their mind. But there are things like the paranoia and the delusions, which are called positive symptoms. And there are things like the apathy, the empathy, the lack of emotion, which is called blunted affect, as well as the lack of any kind of interest in anything that is normal or productive, socializing, speaking. The person becomes very withdrawn. The person becomes very inward looking, and oftentimes the person will lash out too if the person is compromised enough. So it is a very complex smorgasbord of what should I say, happenings going on in the inside of the person. So you will feel with the delusions, which are fixed false beliefs, people are talking about you, people are laughing at you, um, people are conspiring, along with the paranoia. You feel like you're a target for persecution. You feel like you are being surveillanced. You feel like you're being watched. You feel like people are poisoning you. People are trying to kill you. So it's a very serious kind of process that goes on in the schizophrenic process. I had been through all of that, you know, and I can tell you that even with the aid of medications today, this is actually the best of me that I can identify today after having struggled for over 20 years with the illness. This is the best of me. Although I'm on medications, and even though a couple of years before this, I was totally out of it and very, very, very compromised mentally until I even started walking naked at different points in
Wow.
time in the Morant Bay community. That was how far it went. But when I actually was released from the foremost mental health institution, the Bellevue Hospital, in 2017, in 2018, January the 31st, I made a pact that, you know what, for now, I'm just going to comply with my regimen, go to my clinic, and not allow this thing to go to where it actually went. So, as I said, sometimes with the process of going through the psychotic phase, this is when sometimes you're not medicated and you become very ill. You feel like you look in the light bulb and you feel like cameras are in the light bulb. You look on the TV and you feel like what is being relayed on the TV is actually relating to you, directly speaking to you. You feel that the persons on the TV are talking about you, speaking to you.
Wow.
You feel that even family members are trying to kill you. There are so many things that accompany it. Sometimes you actually create word what they call in psychiatry word salads, where you actually jumble your speech so that it is incoherent and no one can really decipher or make any sense of what you say. These are what you call word salads. And there's another term for it that they have in psychiatry. There is also pressure of speech, where the person is just chatting, 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 talking, 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 talking away, and it doesn't make any sense. There are times too when the person who is mentally ill and the person who is psychotic at the time actually commits heinous acts, murderous acts. And I was no stranger and I was no exception to the fact that oftentimes dark things came into my mind, even especially as it concerned dealing with the young man that I raised from infancy, from practically infancy, to adulthood. He was a problem child, and I don't really want to get into any detail, but he was a problem child that we sought out interventions for constantly, and it was just a very frustrating experience dealing with him, and oftentimes I felt very angry at the things that he did and thought that I would, but the Lord really held me back from really doing things that would have actually, you know, put me in problems. And this is one thing I can speak to. My case is not necessarily the typical case of mental illness because there was a grace that held me and undergirded everything that I did. Because the truth is that at the age of 16 years old, I recommitted my life to God and I decided to follow Christ all the way. And that had been my experience. And let me tell you, I took to the Bible on the advice of a mentor, a friend, a former school teacher, Miss Eva English, who was a devout woman of God. I took her advice to get my head into the Word. I was watching the preachings. I was reading. I was exploring literature about the Adventist Church because I had many questions about the Adventist Church. And let me tell you something. I explored readings, written material that had to do with living the Christian life, the victorious Christian life. And, even though many people can attest to having done it more times than that, I was a diligent student of the Word. And I actually went through the Bible cover to cover, every single word, sometimes even going back, not really knowing exactly where I stopped chronologically. I mean, I say chronological, in sequence, cover to cover, with the help of Miss English, who always encouraged me, stay in the Word. And because I committed my life to God, I believe he was able to have buffered me from the worst effects of mental illness. And not only that, I had community support, and I had church support. I had good friends who I could sound off on, who I could talk to, who were very understanding and caring. And oftentimes, these are not features of the typically mentally ill person's life. Most times, mentally ill persons live a very secluded, a very, what should I say, a very, a very sad existence. But the interactions for me, especially because of the relationships I established even before pre-schizophrenia, the relationships that I established in my parish of St. Thomas, the relationships were great. And there were a number of people I can cite who rallied to the task when I got ill, took me to the doctor, you know, who, when I was having problems, listened. And all of those things are very, very, very important. So I can tell
Wow,
you, in
so
spite of the fact,
this is so
in spite of
powerful.
the fact that,
Yes, go
okay,
on. This is so
in spite of the,
powerful.
yes, in
You-
spite of the
I
fact
wanted,
that I,
sorry, I wanted to mention the part of your community, and
yes,
you don't see this at all. how
Yes.
community rally around.
Yes.
And let's talk about your community, because I think that nearly made me teary eye. So you said that
Okay.
there are people in your community. Let's talk about that.
Yes, man. The Red Hill Spend community or the Morant-based St. Thomas community, in the area that we lived what you would say in the urban area of the country. We lived near the capital. The Red Hill Spend community is a housing scheme, where in Jamaica, where typically lower middle class people actually live. And it is not that saying middle class. It is not that we didn't have our struggles. Life was difficult. But let me tell you something. There was a special, there was a special bond that the persons on Red Hills housing scheme had, especially when we were children. And let me tell you, the relationships that we established were very, very rich. The interactions that we had as children, we would be trading video game cartridges, we would be playing in the streets. We would be going up to the hill to look for guineps. I think they call those chenets in Trinidad. Go up to the hills to look for guineps, for mangoes and stuff
Akis,
like that.
Akis.
Aki, guineps, mangoes, plums, coolie. We had coolie plums. We had so many fruit trees, so that even if we didn't have food in our houses, we could go to the trees and get our food. So we ran wild and free as children. There were hardly any crimes. There were people like Mama Tiny, Miss Tiny Reed, who ran a little cottage industry where she sold traditional Jamaican snacks, tamarind balls, grater cakes. She made pastry, cupcakes, toto. She stewed plums, she stewed tamarind, and she sold to us. She made peppermint sweetie, and we would all buy from her and all of those things. And let me tell you something, man. Life was sweet as a child, as children, growing up on Red Hills Housing Scheme. Actually, my mother, and father, who were prominent members of the community. My mother was a school teacher, and my father was a bus driver. They actually, because of their musical interest, which they imparted to me, were my father used to play the organ at the Martin Seventh-day Adventist Church for years, and one elder, who I believe is Elder Bingham, always said that my father was the one who played the organ the best in the church, and my father was serving the community, being a bus driver, plying the route from St. Thomas to Kingston, Morant Bay to Kingston, and he was pretty well known. They call him Bambino. He's now actually visually impaired, and living in the U.S. But my mother, who was a very musical person, she was part of a musical group called the Trisons in the Morant Bay Seventh-day Adventist Church that was very popular, in the Morant Bay Circle, and who would sing at various functions. She was also a part of a folk music group in St. Thomas with, other teachers and other persons from the Morant Bay community. And so, she was actually a member of the Horticultural Society, in St. Thomas. And, that was one where, persons who had interest in flowers would actually meet and all of that. And so she was a very active member of the St. Thomas community, but she died in 2015 of cancer, and it was really a blow. But I have learned to pick up my, the pieces and move on. But I can tell you, there's so much I can tell you about community.
Father touch.
But that's just a picture that I give. I mean, we were just such a close knit set of people, and there was also Cottage Pen down the road, which was a depressed area, and we as children would go from the scheme down to the river in the summers to swim in the what is the name of the river down there, the Morant River. We would swim in the river in summers. My bigger brothers, Dave and Dexter, and our cousins and their friends, at that time would go to the river and would row boat, as as they call it. We would cook food. They would cook food, dumplings and chicken back, dumpling and ackee and chicken back and all of those things. So, I mean, I couldn't even.
Siblings.
I haven't even begun to tell you about just how special, and magical back in the day was here. There was music in almost every home. There was music in almost every home on Reddell's housing scheme. And our parents, and those who were in charge of us, were very, community oriented. And we took care of each other. We shared with each other. We gave to each other. And we may have had our disagreements, but, I mean, nothing could have broken the bonds. And up to this day, having remained in the Red Hills community since 1981 when I moved from Miramar Drive here to my home, I still maintain some of the relationships, with some of the older persons, because most of the younger persons and many persons have moved on and have gone either migrated or emigrated to other parishes and stuff like that. But I can attest, to even our school life. I can
Yeah.
attest to even school life at the Morant Bay All Age School. It was so special. The teachers were so dedicated, and everyone,
Sean,
took
you brought
care
me
of
back.
everyone.
You brought
Yes,
me back like when there was no crime. You brought me
yes.
back to this point. This is one of my best interview ever. I don't
Okay,
know
thank
why, but your spirit, I like your spirit. Now,
you.
this
Okay, thank
magazine
you.
goes to 130 something countries. Your
Okay,
face will be seen all around the world. Tell me,
okay.
tell us more about your musical background. Are you a singer?
Yes, I am. I am. I am a singer.
Can you give us a little bit?
Yeah. You mean sing? You want me to
Can you
sing, or
yes,
you
can
want me
you
to
give us
speak?
no, you can sing. Give us a little bit of something.
Okay, no problem. But let me just give you a background. As I said, a very good family friend and church sister at the time, Sister Hyacinth Shaw, who is now in a nursing home in an adjoining community. I visit her whenever I go to my psychiatric clinic because it's near that. I visit her once a month, at most or least. And, she was there from the get-go and was a very nurturing, caring person. But let me tell you, the musical gift that the Lord gave me was something that was so special and magical. As I said, I was told I did my first full length concert at the Anglican Church Hall when I was 3 years old. I mean, I sang multiple songs because there was always music playing in our home. My father, who was what you would say, farm worker, who went to Guantanamo Bay to work in the 70s. I believe he was working from the 60s, 70s down. He would buy records, albums, and take home. And, listening to them as a child, and assimilating all the music, that actually helped me to do very well in my studies, in school as a child and stuff like that. And let me tell you something, my music was always playing in my home. My brothers loved music, and they were the ones who were responsible mainly for taking the Jamaican music into the home. My father was not a fan of reggae, but he was a fan, an avid listener and fan of classical music. And so he would always play his albums. And, we would hear the classical music in our home, as well as music from Pat Boone, music from the Heritage Singers, music from Skeeter Davis, music from Andy Williams, music from the Ray Conniff Singers, music from ABBA, which was a major musical influence of mine, that group. I believe they were the ones who helped me to be able later on, because I started writing songs at 14 years old, and they were the ones who actually, inspired me to make sweet, um, very, very orally aesthetic melodies and developed my musical talents. And so I was told by a church sister at the time who used to teach me my Sabbath school, Bible stories, Sister Burnett, that she always remembered when as a child as a little child, my father was playing the organ in church, and I would always leave from where I was and go and sit right beside him on the bench while he played that organ, in church.
So how many
And
instruments do you play the organ to, Sean?
actually, in a brief stint, at the Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts in Kingston, Jamaica, I, learned a bit of the formal side of music theory, and started learning the keyboard. My mother, when I broke down, firstly mentally in 1997, she, was told by the doctor that music is good therapy for persons who suffer from, mental illness. So she wanted me to enroll in the Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts, which eventually I did, but I only lasted 3 semesters as a result of not having been medicated and not having been educated about the illness, about medications, you know. So I did very well, for the 3 semesters that I attended, the Edna Manley College and pursued that performance course, which was actually named CLADS for short, Caribbean, Latin American, and Jazz Studies. For the
Yeah.
3 semesters that I was there, I was at the top of my class. But let me tell you, I was constantly singing as a child everywhere. I loved singing. And the thing is that I loved it so much that I would come down with frequent bouts of tonsillitis, pharyngitis, laryngitis, you know, and even the cold and the flu. And let me tell you, up to this day, my tonsils are permanently diseased as a result of the repeated infections that I had, as a result of singing, as well as a very low immune system. I would have frequent bouts of tonsillitis, and my tonsil has developed pockets that sometimes collect the food that I eat, so particles of the food, and create tonsillitis. So there are times when, I have fetid breath as a result of the tonsillitis accumulating, and would have to do a kind of sucking action, which I learned when I was a child, to take out those hardened food particles, so that I could get my breath fresh again. So that was the extent to which I loved music. And even when I was older, I was singing in school, in high school, constantly. And even when I was older, as a child, I would collect music. I would buy music at the local music record shop in Morant Bay. At that time, they had everything, and we would, we had music all around. So my father played the piano, the organ, or the piano, and the piano. And my mother, she had the sweetest operatic voice that I've ever heard. And I believe that my vocal abilities were definitely, you know, coming from her, definitely came from her. People could attest, and she
So
was always very
can we hear
scared.
your vocal abilities this morning? Just a little piece.
Okay, and before I do that, just briefly let me tell you that the antipsychotic medications that I am on um make it sometimes, most times, impossible to sing. And as a result of that, it was why when I was diagnosed, um I actually delved more into songwriting, because um, I came after prolonged antipsychotic use. I actually um, I actually wasn't able to sing for a number of years. So
Wow.
if I do sing, it's not really reflective of the total scope of my vocal abilities. But if I do sing, you know, it is nowhere near how I can sing or how the Lord has blessed me. It is nowhere near to the abilities when I am totally free of the medications, when they are out of my system. Especially now, it's totally out of this world. I can't explain it. God has really been good and has really gifted me, immensely. So, yes, you want me to sing? I will try, because for the past couple of days, my voice actually had been clearing. So I was able to even sing a song Saturday morning a hymn and place it on Facebook. So anyway, I mean, one of my favorite songs is Morning Has Broken. It's a hymn that I learned in the Adventist church, and it used to be played constantly on JBC television and RJR radio. So yes, I'm without further ado, I'm going to try to sing. You know. So anyway, this is what it sounds like. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for them singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. You know, that's a hymn, you know, but, you know, there are so many things I can do with my voice, but, you know, that is just the tip of the iceberg, as God has really blessed me, you know? Yes.
Wow, Sean.
Yes.
You're a special guy. Tell us a little
Yes.
bit more about your poem, your books. I
Yes.
realize that you're really gifted. Someone wrote earlier, when I wanted to answer
Yes.
to them, you
Yes.
said, God, you can see that this young man, Sean, is gifted.
Yes.
Now, Satan is the one who makes us sick. Satan
Okay.
is the one who allows generational stuff to be in our lives.
And,
So I
yes.
want to
Yes.
tell her it's a curse and God can remove that. It's a generational, which my part of my family is Barbadian. And
Yes.
I realized that a part of my father's family had issues, and I had to break off that off my life because I had to
Yes.
break off that curse off of my life when I understand the curse of the fourth and third generation. I had to break that up because I was going through some stuff. But I just want to let you, we're not gonna argue about that. People has their own stuff. But you are totally special, Sean. You're a special guy. And
I
when I
have come
first
to.
saw you on Facebook, I said, oh boy, I've got to have him on Breathe magazine. So
Okay.
tell
Thank
us a
you.
little bit, tell us a little bit about, I am also going to start to highlight your books on my website
Okay.
to make sure that you get all the sales that you can get from your poetry. I am going
Okay.
to start to have them on the website. I'll be
Yes.
promoting. This is not only a magazine, but I'm going to promote your books that you will
Okay.
be able to
Thank you.
have. I'll promote your books and talk about your books. Not only this, at some point, I will invite you to be able to travel where you will promote your books. Your books should not be sitting on Amazon.com. They should be known and
Okay.
so on. So I'll be doing all of this. Tell us a little bit more about your poems, and maybe
Yes.
probably you can read part of the poems that you have. I
Okay.
realize that you have a sweet voice, and I'm
Okay.
asking God to do something awesome with you. Tell us a little bit about your poem.
Okay. Well, you know, actually, as I said, I started out with singing as the only talent that I had. But I remembered, just to give you a little background, I remembered in the Marguerite Seventh-day Adventist Church singing as a child. One talent have I to take to the sky, while others are blessed with 10 of the best. Why should I complain, from duty refrain? No, never, not I. We would sing that in church, Sabbath school, as well as sing it in school, regular school. And I am a living testament and testimony to the fact that when you are faithful in small things, the Lord actually makes you ruler over many things. And it
My
was
goodness.
only as my voice became completely compromised, as a result of antipsychotic use and overuse of my voice, working as a cashier for almost 5 years speaking to the public, collecting money at the Marguerite Health Center. My vocals were totally decimated. You know, there were times you couldn't even hear me speaking. But as a result of the antipsychotics that I was taking, I was actually unable to pen songs, you know, anymore, write songs anymore. So I turned to poetry, and I developed a love for the art, and I started writing poems one at a time until I realized I was writing more profusely. I never had any formal training in writing poetry or songs. As a matter of fact, I never really had any formal training in anything that I put my hand to. There might have been minimal tutelage, you know, as it was in Edna College, but it was never anything comprehensive. But I was always a bright person, so I caught on to things, and the musical ability, you know, actually, you know, developed my brain to a point that I was able to actually uh, do a number of things. So anyway, poetry became my resort as I was unable to start to keep singing and writing songs. And let me tell you, again, being faithful and sticking to the task, you know, the Lord actually enabled me to become better at it, you know, and I have actually ended up writing close to, I probably shouldn't even say the number right now. I don't, you know, but I won't disclose it, but a number of poems for a number of years. And it's so sad that I'm not able to read it for you because I didn't take the book that I had, the volume that I had to even read a sample.
Okay.
But I have a wealth of them on Facebook, right? And as a matter of fact, it's so funny. Sometimes God does things in reverse, not necessarily the way that we would want it, you know. But sometimes, you know, he you know, he does things in very peculiar ways. And I thought that I was going to be the superstar, that I was going to be the breakout musical success all my life. But the funny thing was that I was never able to pursue music at a professional level, you know, even though I was at the top of my class in Edna College in every course for the 3 semesters, in every class, you know, but poetry became something that was very therapeutic as well as the songwriting, but poetry
Can
was
I say something? Can I say something to you,
very
Sean?
cathartic. Yes, and please just let me finish this one
Okay,
point,
go on.
please. Yes, I just want to say that on the advice of friends, I entered a national poetry competition, which is the JCDC's creative writing contest for a number of years,
Okay.
and tried and tried and tried until I ended up winning the competition 2 years in a
Wow.
row, national competition, you know. And I'm telling you, it was, you know, I never knew that I would have become today as good at poetry as I really do believe I have, but I am. But it is all because God has blessed, you know, faithfulness in small things. And that is one of the things I really would like to let people know, that the Bible says, do not despise small beginnings. And it's a very poignant statement, and it's a principle, it's a spiritual principle that really carries where the Lord tests us. David was in the wilderness, on the backside of the wilderness, tending
Yes.
sheep before he became king, you know. So that, you know, like that, you know that. So, you know, faithfulness in small things, yes. You
All
know,
right. I just want.
I'm really
Okay,
an
go on.
advocate of that, an advocate of being faithful in small things. And that is how God actually knows that you can handle other things. Yes.
All right. What I want to say to you today, Sean, is that there isn't anything that is impossible with God. You are
True.
such a brilliant person, and I'm looking forward to work with you. I'm looking forward to work with you. And tell us, or tell the viewers, how
Yes.
to be able to find your poetry books.
Okay. Well, you know, it was a friend of mine, who actually suggested that I go on to social media, Facebook in particular, and people were suggesting all along for me to market my books on social media, as they said this was the way to go. And actually, I did, open the Facebook account on the advice of Mr. Leon Ford, at whose, mother's parents' home I am now, recording this, because the Wi-Fi is strong here. The Wi-Fi, would enable us to have better communication. But Mr. Leon Ford did suggest, and I finally decided to take it up. And what happened was that I began sharing samples of my work as well as putting up the pictures of the books on Facebook. So there are a number of poems from the books, from the 6 small collections of poetry, as well as other poetry that I have on Facebook that you can go to and read for free, as well as other websites such as writerscafe.org, allpoetry.com, poemhunter.com, and my 2 Facebook pages. I have a page directly and what should I say? I have a poetry page that is dedicated to posting only written and spoken form.
Go on.
Yes, only written and spoken forms of poetry. However, Amazon is the major platform that has the book on sale. But there are having self-published with createspace.com, which was an affiliate of Amazon, which is, that website has closed. Amazon has taken over, the whole KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing thing. So I'm published on Amazon as well as e-stores all over the world, meaning they can have these books for sale, via, online sale, and there are actually 6 collections.
Yep.
One, let me let you know what they are. The first 2 are faith-based poetry books, A Deeper Joy and 3 Steps Away from Faith. Those are actually the showcases of my Christian and inspirational poetry. The third is actually As I Reminisce, a recollection of my Jamaican experience. That is poetry that I actually wrote and compiled in that book. That would basically speak of life growing up in Morant Bay, St. Thomas, Jamaica, in the country here. As I Reminisce, it has a chapter on family, and I have written for family members. It has a chapter on nature. It has a chapter on personalities, other personalities that I grew up with, elderly persons and stuff. Poetry about them, poetry about, the last chapter is actually poems on growing older. So all of these will, all of these in this book will actually, this book actually captures the ambience of the country setting and growing up in traditional Jamaican, in the traditional Jamaican setting. The other book, the next book that I put out, was actually Special Poems for Exceptional Children, which is poetry for children aged 7 to 12 years, which is actually poetry for children that is very affirming in nature, and positive. There is actually a whole chapter. It's a very small book and it's an easy read for children, and it actually contains even a chapter dedicated to the importance of, the parental element, and encouraging children to be obedient to parents and to listen and all of that. And the last chapter is actually poetry that I had written, actual poetry I had written for children. I had affirmed a few children that I had affirmed in one way or the other.
Yeah.
So it's a very nice little book. And then the next book is actually
Oh, thank you, Father.
the next book is The Black in Me, which is an Afrocentric collection of poetry. that showcases the black experience, the black struggle, the compromise of the black psyche, as well as, pieces extolling, the glories, of, blackness and the black race. And the last that I would mention is actually The Legend of a Woman, which is a poetry collection that dedicated women and womanhood. There are two, well, actually they are not divided in chapters. What it entails is poetry I have actually written for women, for the women folk, especially of Morant Bay St. Thomas, who were actually instrumental in my development and experience, whether at church or wherever. You have poems there that are dedicated to persons like Sister, Verona O'Connor, who is a stalwart in the Adventist church, as well as, persons, my mother, who when she migrated to the US and worked, persons who she actually worked with. And then there are general poems on womanhood, speaking of the struggles, the pains, the glories of women. And that's it. It's 6 collections of poetry, actually.
Wow, this is beautiful, Sean. It was a pleasure, real pleasure,
Okay.
speaking with you. We are going to get in contact. As a matter of fact, I'm going to call you back in 5 minutes because I want to take a shot of you right where you are.
Okay.
I'm going to take a shot of you. I'm going to call you on WhatsApp. But this is
Okay.
what I want to say to you. You have been a
Yes.
blessing this morning
Thank
to let me big up the Jamaican people.
you. Okay,
Jamaican
always.
people. So I want to
Always.
big up the Jamaican people this morning for having such an extraordinary man of God. What I like about you is that you talk about God all the time and you give God the glory for
Yes.
what
He
has
always has to
happened
get
to
it.
you. So
Yes.
I want to big up the Jamaican people. As a matter of fact, we have a few thousands of Jamaican who follows me on my
Okay.
show. So I will be in Jamaica for our conference, Reign of Revival conference. I'm coming to see you. I don't know wherever you are. I'm coming to see you. I'm coming with my camera crew. We have to do some sort of documentary about your life, and I'll talk
Okay.
to you about that. But I also want to push your books, and I will do that on my website and talk about your
Yes.
books and give you the platform that you need. Somebody mentioned that you should be a motivational speaker. You are a motivational speaker. He is a motivational speaker. So
Okay.
we pray that the Lord will do great and mighty things and continue to do great and mighty things in his life.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Thank you.
Somebody talks about, I grew up in the Adventist church. Now I want to say God is not about religion. God is
Indeed.
about having a real relationship and you treating others the best way. As a matter of
True.
fact, my designer Susan Reeve, she's Adventist. I want to big you up this morning, Susan Reeve. She's an Adventist lady that makes all my clothes, the wonderful outfits that I wear to go all around the world. Susan Reeve. God is not interested in whether you are Adventist, whether you're a Jehovah's Witness, but He's interested in you having a proper relationship with your brothers and sisters, a proper
Indeed. Indeed.
relationship with Him. He ain't care about no Adventist. He ain't care about none of that. Religion does not stand in the eyes of God. So, Sean, what's your last word for the public, those in Jamaica and those around the world?
All right. I would just like to say, adding to that, I have made a lot of mention of, the Adventist church. And I do not want to give the impression that I was never exposed to anything else. The fact that I was exposed to many, many devout um, apostolics and, Kojic persons, Kogop, Church of God of Prophecy, Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, you know, having had rich interactions with so many people from so many different wavelengths, that actually cemented in me a consciousness of the fact that we are all God's children. Something, some of the persons that I knew who were of other persuasions, even, though there is bigotry everywhere, like even from the Pentecostal faith, I have friends from the Pentecostal faith whom I cherish, dearly, you know, and from other faiths, even the Rastafarians, even I have even one friend who embraced Islam, and I do not try to discriminate or to say that I am better. I try to meet people where they are. I try to find common ground. And I would just like to say, that mental illness is something that whether or not you believe that it is a generational or it is a curse, it is something oftentimes that needs more dialogue. It actually needs more venting. The issues, need more venting. And oftentimes it is a heart of man that as I grieve for, that sometimes does not, extend kindness and love to the mentally ill and those who are the less fortunate among us. I was very fortunate, and I have been very fortunate and blessed to have been lifted up and buoyed up by some very good people. And this is not necessarily the experience of the typically mentally ill person. And I would just like to say, wherever you see one, if you know one, if one is in your family, if one was your co-worker, if one was your friend, if one was a church member, if one was any kind of associate and became compromised like this, please reach out as best you can. I am always saying that I know that mental illness takes very ugly turns oftentimes, and I do not object to the view that oftentimes there is an underlying demonic element, but we should not really look at this at the expense of addressing other underlying things, trauma, you know, physical things, nutrition, all of these things that actually work and conspire to make the complex that is mental illness. So yes, many persons are in need of deliverance, but there is a lot of embracing, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of understanding and patience that needs to be exercised with the mentally ill. And I'm calling on our governments and even the government of Jamaica to facilitate the mentally ill even more. Like even in foreign countries where there are aides who are assigned to the mentally ill community to regulate them.
Hallelujah.
Live productive lives. These are things, housing, support for those who cannot work, as usually mental illness manifests in the career forming years, impeding and inhibiting any kind of effort for most mentally ill persons to empower themselves. So as a result, they form, the poorer demographic among us, and oftentimes as a resort to begging, eating out of garbage bins. It's not done in a vacuum. Oftentimes there is no support, there is no income, there is no food. There is no medical treatment that is considered for many of these persons. There is no housing, no accommodation. So please, I know I'm saying a lot, but it's something that is on my heart simply because of how I have been affected through the years and what I have observed. And all I can say is, there go I, but for the grace of God. There were many things that would have worked together for me to have maintained, my sanctity. And even when I was compromised from 2013 to 2018, you know, I was subject to the same abuses that anyone else would have been an upstanding community member who worked for 10 seal years, 1 decade in the health sector in his parish, and I was actually hit with stones. I was actually driven away
Wow.
from places. I actually had to end up begging. I actually walked naked a number of times from Morant Bay to Kingston. I walked from Morant Bay to Kingston because I was in such anguish and in the throes of the illness. So I beg us as persons who might be able to reach out in any way you can, if it's even a listening ear, if it's even a cup of cold water, until that person gets what he, really needs from God himself and is healed. Please let us not, forbear to actually reach out arms and hearts of love and compassion and give to this demographic that is the mentally ill among us. Often very hard to deal with. Often,
Wow, Sean,
often
this was
often, let me
something
just say,
else.
often, yes, I'm sorry, just let me say, I'm going to finish. Often coupled with struggles with addictions and stuff like that. Very ugly oftentimes, but please let it be that we follow the axiom in the Bible that says, for the love of Christ or the love of God constraineth us. You know, please, that is my last word for now.
Wow. I hope the authorities in Jamaica are hearing, and I
Yeah.
want you to share this program everywhere you can. This is an intelligent
Okay.
guy, but he's talking and he's saying about the things that he suffered as a mental illness young man. He's not a fool. You can see that this guy is really an intelligent guy. So listen, guys. I
Yeah.
am Apostle Marguerite Breedy-Haynes for Breathe Magazine. I will get in contact with Sean. Sean, I'm looking forward to work with you. I'm looking forward to work with you. I think that we are going to work for a long time and to get your books where it's supposed to be. I want to thank you for listening to this powerful time with Sean Harrison from Jamaica. God bless
Okay.
you, and we will talk. We will see very soon. I'll call you in 5 minutes, Sean. This was awesome. God bless you.
Okay. Thank you. And
Bye-bye.
just one last thing.
Yeah, go on.
My author name, my stage name is actually Sean C. Harrison. And many persons actually, leave out the middle initials, which is C, and that's very important because if you do
Okay,
search
let me
on the
say it
internet,
back. Sean
yes,
C. Harrison. What
yes,
does C what does C signifies? What it stands for,
Christopher,
Sean?
Christopher,
What does C stands for?
Christopher,
Okay,
Christopher,
Sean
yes,
Christopher Harrison. All
Harris,
right, stay
yes,
where you are. I call you because I need to take a shot of you. I think I'm going to
yes,
have a better picture if I take a shot of you. All right?
okay,
So the magazine cover will be out in the next 15 minutes. Then
okay,
we work. I dedicate this magazine especially to mental illness
okay,
and how we are to treat those that are going through mental illness. Actually, we have a mental illness nurse in our ministry.
wow,
So
yes,
I'm gonna connect Reverend Wazim Warrell with you today. I'm gonna connect
okay,
with you today. And so he's a mental illness. That is his expertise. So I'm gonna connect him with you today. All right. God
okay.
bless
Thank
you.
you.
Okay.
Yes,
Bye
God
bye,
bless you too.
guys. Love you all.
Thank you.
One
Thank
love.
you. Yes.